Okay, let's see how we're doing. All right. We are streaming live, I think. Hello, everybody. It's Uncle Grumpy. Give me a minute here. Let's make sure we're live before we get too far into this. Lawrence, how are you doing today?
I'm trying to figure that out. I'm okay.
Okay, well, we are live, so you got to come up with more than I'm trying to figure that out. You need to say you're doing great.
I've been spinning my wheels all day.
Have you? You've been spinning your wheels. Okay. Well, darn it. Hang on. Let me turn this down. All right. Spinning your wheels. Well, let's see. While we're playing the puns. Hey, everybody, while we're waiting for a few of you to join in, if you don't mind, share this, please. And we will, let's see if my computer will open up. We will talk about the elephant in the room.
Let me just interject. Are you sure we're live?
Yes, we are. I'm looking at us right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we are live. Unfortunately, they're having to watch us. Yeah.
So I could see people's comments. Could you tell me where this is? Oh, I got it. I found it. There we are.
All right. So I got to share it to a few pages. Hold on.
There we go. All right. Now I got it. Hello, everyone. Hi, Norma. Hi, Christine, Deb, Johnny, John.
A whale of a time.
Yep.
So we better get busy before everything blows up. Have I beat it to death yet? All right. We're going to go inside the Capitol. I love doing this part. Let's see. We're going to go inside the Capitol and take a look at 3228 today. All right. Let me share this a couple times. I haven't put it on my page yet, or my our pages yet. Let's see. Whoops, wrong button. All right. Hopefully everybody's sharing this because I'm not doing it right. Wrong phone. You know, I'm not sure why, but iPhone does one thing and Galaxy does another, and you would think they would overlap a little better, but they don't. So I have to do some stuff on one phone and some stuff on the other. Hello,
Vanessa. Hello, Marguerite.
How has your day been, Lawrence? Now, earlier you said you weren't sure, but now you got to give a more substantial answer.
I spent a lot of time waiting for a colleague of mine to call me. We are working on a project together, and so I just felt like a lot of my day was sort of held up waiting for him. And besides that, I finished my my respirator. I've been building a powered air purifying respirator, a PAPR. Normally the commercial versions cost $1,000 or more. I've been building one for myself.
Now, when you say building, you've been doing this 3D printing thing, right?
Yeah, I had to get some parts 3D printed in order to complete it.
Okay. Very cool. All right. So let's see. I'm just glancing here at your notes. We have some notes. Let's talk about what happened the other day. For those that don't know it, hello, everybody. Good to see you guys. We're going to talk about the legislation that passed Friday night. Most of you know this, but those of you that don't, it passed late into the night. Both the House and the Senate were there past, I think past 10 o'clock.
Hello, Kaylin.
Before it finally passed. And when it did, it had some amendments on it. It had some horse trading. It had some horse trading going on in the last couple hours.
Oh yeah.
And it ended up at the end. By the next morning, I think we were all reading to see what version finally passed. I know we were all involved in. I know Ron Durbin was down there after he did all his hard work putting it together. He was down there live watching it. I was sitting here streaming it live and messaging with senators who were flipping out about the amendments.
Yep.
So it was a close one. It was a close one, but It did pass, and we, of course, had to take a look at the final result. In fact, the two things that I thought, or at least we heard, we all were putting out that were wrong with it the first 12 hours, turns out maybe aren't wrong with it. So let's do that, Lawrence. You've gone over this a little bit. You've got some notes. Let's take a look at what you've got and discuss some of what's going on in this bill.
Sure. I'm going to set up a screen share here. So
Okay,
everybody
hold
can
on one second.
follow.
The bill, for those who don't know, is HB 3228. That is the combined cannabis bill. I think they call it an omnibus bill, and it's got
Yep.
multiple things in it like that. Ron Durbin helped put it together. It was a group of all of the bills that were up in as far as cannabis this year. Not everything made the cut, unfortunately. And we lost some things in horse trading, but that's, somebody had asked what bill it was, but that's the bill, HB 3228.
Yeah, you know, we at the OCLA pushed for three things in particular, and we got two of the three. And the two things that we got aren't sort of in the ideal perfect form that we were hoping for, but you know, as a result of all the negotiations, we still made some really meaningful progress. So, you know, this has been work that's been going on almost since basically the end of last session last year. We've been pushing for this. And so the end result, given the virus, right, given all the difficulties going on, it's not ideal, but like I said, it's still relevant progress. So we're going to go over the major changes. I have it divided up basically between patient consumer related issues and business. And apologies in advance. I tend to kind of skim more at the business stuff because it's not really my focus. But the patient stuff is what I tend to really pay most attention to. So, all right.
Yeah.
So,
Wait, hold on one second. And when Lawrence says we pushed for a lot of this, what he's referring to is mostly the patient stuff.
yeah.
As he says, our concentration has not necessarily, that's been Ron Durbin's area. He's handled more of that. So let's go ahead.
Yeah. So just again, just a little bit of background. The three things that we wanted from the OCLA was we wanted to open up the program to people out of state so they don't have to have residency in Oklahoma in order to get a patient license. We wanted delivery. And then we also wanted dispensaries to actually function more like apothecaries, so that a dispensary can, for instance, custom make tinctures and vapes for patients. And we got versions of the first two, but you know, number three didn't make it.
Well,
So
it didn't make it for the tinctures. Luckily, they'll at least be able to they'll be able to make their own pre-rolls. So
right.
by chance, a mix of flour might help. In some cases, they'll be able to do that.
Yeah. All right. So some of the bigger ones we'll spend more time on, but there are a few little bits of minutia that are kind of just interesting and worth noting. That a lot of people might remember in State Question 788, that if you're not a patient licensee and you're pulled over by law enforcement and you're in possession, then if you can state a medical condition, then basically you would just face a misdemeanor and a $400 fine. So they changed the language of that to remove the requirement to state a medical condition. So you don't have to go, officer, I have fibromyalgia, right? You're no longer, to get that misdemeanor charge as opposed to a felony charge, the law has changed. You don't have to state the medical condition. Now, of course, you still can, and it might be smart to do so because you don't know what the law enforcement officer themselves has been trained. But nevertheless, the law has changed so that if you're not a patient licensee and you get pulled over and you are in possession, then you don't have to state that medical condition. Right now, the law, basically the way it works is if you're not a patient licensee and you're in a possession of 1.5 ounces or less, then the officer would charge you with the misdemeanor with a $400 fine. He would cite you and release you. It wouldn't be an arrest. That, at least, is the way it's supposed to work. And now you don't even have to state the medical condition. All right, that's one change. That's section 1B. Next, I have highlighted here because it was one of our priorities. What we wanted was to allow people from Texas and from Kansas and Arkansas and all the other states from other countries or wherever if they needed to come here to have medical treatment, if they had cancer and they were seeking RSO treatment, or they wanted to find out if cannabis would help them with pain or whatever, we wanted to give everybody the opportunity to get a patient license. So that
Yeah,
was our goal.
and I want to point out the origin of that one because it's extremely personal to me. That was one of the main reasons I moved here to the city and to Representative Eccles district, so that we could use the floor leader to try and get that idea through there. So go ahead, Lawrence.
Yeah, you know, Chris literally moved across the state in order to get that provision into this year's legislation. So what we got was a compromise. People from out of state can come here and get a patient license, but only a 90-day renewable license. So if you have a family member in Texas, for instance, until this bill, they would have to become a resident of Oklahoma to be able to get a patient license. This bill allows them to come to Oklahoma, maintain their Texas residency, and get a patient card that will be good for 90 days, and it's indefinitely renewable. All right.
And this also addresses, this isn't just about bringing people across the state line. Okay. So I know a lot of people are going to freak out about that. That's not what this is just about. It's just about helping sick people and not caring where the state line is. So some of these people may be in Oklahoma and not be residents of Oklahoma, not have an Oklahoma driver's license. Their car may be registered in another state. They may be a student and they may have a job where they're here temporarily. There's 100 reasons I could come up with as to why somebody might live in Oklahoma and not meet the requirements that before now they had to meet. So this is not about, I want to emphasize that, this is not about state lines. This is about no state lines.
This is about humanitarian compassion. Those who truly believe in the medical value of cannabis, that value should not be limited to borders. Anybody who has need should have access. And so we want to make that happen. And we got something of it. We got a 90-day license.
Yeah, I had to call some friends in Kansas this week. I called them yesterday to tell them about that. And I was a little disappointed. I wasn't able to tell them they were going to be able to get a 2-year license. But I got to tell you, they just had surgery not long ago and they were in tears, so happy that they were going to be able to get a 90-day license. The way they worked it out, they should be about at their end of their medication, about the time, and the recovery, their rehab, about the time that this takes effect, and they'll be able to travel and they can use cannabis in Oklahoma to get off the rest of their medications.
Yeah. And bear in mind, you know, if you're excited about this and you're telling your relatives from out of state, it's not in effect yet, right? So we have to wait for the governor to sign it, but then also, I don't know what the effective date is. Do you?
I don't think it's till November 1st. I think originally there was an emergency clause on it, but a conversation I had earlier, I have a feeling the one that passed doesn't have the emergency clause. Maybe you could, but we might could check while we're on here. Ron Durbin, if you're watching, if you're not, I'll message him. We'll ask him if the emergency clause made it. I'm not
Find
sure.
out when the effective date of the legislation is. A normal might know, but
Yeah.
this, we have to wait for the governor to sign it, and then it has an effective date after that. So let me move on. And this is just a little bit of a sort of a minor point, but the 788 stated that patient licenses will have a 24-digit code, and that's kind of onerous for, you know, the dispensaries to type in. And so they changed it to a 10 to 24-digit code. So hypothetically, when everybody renews their license this coming year or over the next few years, instead of having a 24-digit code, they might bring that number of digits down to 10. It may not be that relevant to people.
It will actually, because the dispensaries who have to enter this in, and this is the fight we run into with dispensaries. We say, stop scanning our driver's license. They say they want to do it because boom, they scan it and it enters all that information. If we don't allow them to do that, they have to look at the card and they have to sit there and individually put in all 24 digits. So I understand the need for that.
Yep.
That's good.
All right. And just sort of as a minor thing, and we don't really know what the teeth is on this, that if you're planning on renewing, your card, then they've set up that there will be a 30-day late fee for patient renewals. And I think the logic there is that when you renew it, you might be able to get that renewal at a reduced rate. But if you don't, and it then expires and you want to have it renewed, then there's going to be a late penalty, and they don't set what that is. So you could always just start a brand new renewal. You don't have to pay the penalty, presumably. You can start a brand new card. But they just added in that if your license expires and then you want to renew it, there's a 30-day penalty.
We'll probably have to see how the OMMA lays that out.
That's right. That'll be up to them to come up with the specifics.
All right, what's next?
The next one, which a lot of people were very enthusiastic about, is that dispensaries will be able to sell pre-rolls. That is, they will be able to make their own pre-rolls.
Okay, that's good. Hopefully that will, I mean, that should lower the cost of pre-rolls. So yep. Hopefully that helps the patients.
Yeah, and presumably have them customized too, right? So
yeah, like we were saying, if flour mixes will help you, and I know it will with a lot of people.
Yep.
Okay, let's go to the next one you've got highlighted. That's that important one that you, like I said, the residency thing was something I've been pushing for a while. It was something I thought of, but the delivery was something you've been pushing for since the start of 788.
Yeah, so that's right.
This is very good to see here, even though it has some caveats to it. Go ahead.
Way back with my first meeting with Commissioner Bates in 2018 at the Department of Health, and we were going over the as yet to be implemented rules just after a week and a half after 788 passed, and they had prohibited delivery. My conversation with them started then. Why are you prohibiting delivery? There's nothing in the law that prohibits delivery. And I fought it. I spent 2 years trying to make the case for delivery, and the department and the OMMA basically said, ultimately they'll allow for delivery if the legislators explicitly permit it. So that's something that I've been pushing for a long time, because there are a lot of people with a lot of major medical problems, and it's difficult for them to get out of their home, and it's difficult for them to work out timelines with their caregivers if they have caregivers, and their caregiver might be the person stuck at home with them, and they need a third party to watch that patient while the caregiver might go out. It gets so complicated when you're dealing with households with people with major medical problems.
Okay, so now we've got delivery, but we've got this within 10 miles of the dispensary. But there's a caveat to that, right?
So rather than just having blanket delivery across the state, there are a couple qualifications. One qualification is that delivery can only be within 10 miles of the dispensary, and also only to a private residence. So they won't deliver to your place of work or whatever. They'll deliver to a private residence within 10 miles of the dispensary. If, however, you are living in an area where there are no nearby dispensaries, if you're living in an area where the nearest dispensary is beyond that 10-mile point, then the 10-mile point doesn't apply. You can get delivery from a farther dispensary with the following qualification: it has to still be within your county.
Still has to be within your county.
Right. So the county provision doesn't, so to be clear, the county provision doesn't apply to the 10-mile limit. The way it's written, the county provision only applies to those people who need delivery from greater than a 10-mile distance. So greater than a 10-mile distance, but it still has to be in your county.
Wow. Okay. So, all right. We're gonna hear about that. That's gonna have some issues.
Yeah, and that bothers me, because once again, when you're dealing with people in rural areas,
right,
and it's possible that there may not even be a dispensary in your county in some counties, right? Out in the Panhandle, there's very, very few dispensaries.
Right.
So I don't know how many people that's going to affect, but I'm not happy with that.
It will affect some won't have delivery. All right, let's go ahead and move on. And before we move on, Ron has communicated back November 1st, unless the Senate works out some issue, because the Senate did not vote on the emergency. They did not vote on the bill with an emergency clause.
Right.
That's what I found out this morning too in the conversation I was having. So,
Yeah.
all right, let's move on.
Yeah, all right. November 1st has been my assumption, but I knew that that was still uncertain.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is an interesting little tidbit. In 788, they legalized paraphernalia, but they used the language medical marijuana paraphernalia. And there have been some law enforcement instances out in rural areas, I think, in maybe the year or so after 788 passed, where it became an issue whether or not the paraphernalia was for medical marijuana. Like, how do we know that this is specifically paraphernalia for medical marijuana as opposed to for marijuana in general? And so there were some patients had some harassment issues from law enforcement related to that question. What makes paraphernalia medical paraphernalia? So the word medical was taken out of at least a portion of that sentence. So the way it reads now, it should be read in such a way that marijuana paraphernalia itself has been legalized. It doesn't, you don't have any kind of burden to show that it's medical paraphernalia.
All right, let's move on.
Right. So throughout, the references to HIPAA have been removed. And one of the reasons why is that even though a lot of people are familiar with the acronym HIPAA, HIPAA really only applies to the electronic transfer of information from, say, a provider to a billing agency to an insurance company. So HIPAA basically is a protection for the transfer of information, basically for billing purposes. It doesn't have that sort of broad-based privacy protection that people associate with the terms. It's much more narrow than that. And so they removed the references to HIPAA, but still there's language in there, and the language has been strengthened, in fact, to make it clear that all patient information is confidential, cannot be released to any government agency without a warrant, for instance.
Okay, next.
If your doctor were for some reason to rescind your recommendation, then you have a recourse now. Formerly you didn't. You can receive a 30-day notice and then get a new recommendation within that time frame. So hypothetically, that protects you if, otherwise you may not know that your card has been voided because your doctor rescinded your recommendation, and you might have a law enforcement encounter. But now it's been written such that you will be notified and you have 30 days to get a new recommendation.
Okay, so and this OLITS issue now, we've determined that isn't this the one we've determined has to do with the businesses?
Yeah, this is the one that we dealt with this morning.
Okay, so then you just still got it on this list, and you've still got it under patients.
Hello, Matthew. Yeah, so do you want to discuss it or skip it, Chris?
Well, it doesn't affect the
Patients.
It has to do with the businesses.
That's my assumption.
Okay, well, that's where it says in there. Now, for those who don't know what we're talking about, let's discuss it a little. We're talking about the part that was in 1030 originally that talked about sharing our patient information with law enforcement. Go ahead.
All right. So there was this terrifying, horrible thing in 1030. In Senate Bill 1030 from last year, there was language which suggested that the OMA shall be required to take the patient database and submit it to law enforcement. That was the language in 1030, and we got very worried about that, right? The consequences to people's lives could be dire. And so behind the scenes, there was an agreement for that not to get implemented and to wait until this year's legislation to get that fixed. Well, it didn't exactly get fixed. It did and it didn't. That the version of 3228 that left the House fixed it. But then there was an amendment in the Senate that unfixed it. The amendment in the Senate restored the language in 1030.
But the amendment in the Senate, though, again, affects the businesses. It's under business licensing. not under patient licensing, right?
So the presumption is that it will be interpreted. This is our hope. This is our expectation, that that release of information is going to be specifically just the release of information about business licenses to law enforcement and not the release of information about patient licenses. The language in 6C is not clear in differentiating between those two. But given the context of section 6, it should apply solely to businesses. And furthermore, there's other provisions within this law, new provisions within this law, that makes it all the more clear that patient information is protected and should not be released to any other government entity without a warrant.
Then again, it doesn't have to do with patient information. It has to do with business information.
We're going to need the OMMA. We're going to need the OMMA to interpret it in a friendly manner to make sure that's the case.
All right, let's move on.
Okay.
Now we're on to the businesses, and there's not much to that. We should be able to whip through that pretty quick.
All right. So there was talk about moving some of the property line distances 1,000 feet to 300 feet and so on. What we have right now, basically, in 3228 is that no dispensary may be located within 1,000 feet of a school. That's understood as property line to property line. Property line of the school to the property line of the dispensary. And there's a grandfathering in, so that an existing dispensary, if they are within that and have been allowed under existing law to be in that location, they will continue to be allowed to be within that location. It's been grandfathered in.
Good.
All right.
That's going to save a lot of people, because there was a lot of businesses, I know, in talking to Ron Durbin, there was a lot of businesses that were at risk of falling into that little trap. So
Yep.
Let's be thankful that part got done. All right, next.
Two little revisions regarding the certificate of compliance. One is that it's now clear that the certificate of compliance is specifically only for businesses in incorporated land. That is, for a business located within a metropolitan area, a city or a town, and whatever. And also that certificate of compliance is only required at the time of initial application. You don't need a new certificate of compliance every time you renew your license, unless there's been some kind of material change.
I want to give a shout out to Scott, Representative Scott Fettgetter, for all his work on that. I know he's busted his butt doing the certificate of compliance. I think he was basically the compliance officer for the last 12 months. So thank you to Scott for all his work on that. So, all right, next.
That there is now a requirement for disclosure for any entity that has at least 10% ownership, understood as receiving at least 10% of the profit from the business. And there's a grandfathering issue in there, but basically that is when you have to, I suppose, disclose all the entities that have ownership of the business. It is extended now to anybody who has at least 10% ownership.
Okay. And this OMMA emergency powers, is this the one that gives them the power to do things like they did the other day with the recall?
Yeah, and theoretically a fair bit more than that. It's pretty open-ended, the language. And basically it's that if there is, a danger to public health, the OMMA has powers to issue orders, and all licensees will be required to abide by those orders. It's pretty open-ended.
That's not good. All right. Well, remediation, that would be what they do with a product when it fails testing. Right. So where it was before, if it failed testing, you were supposed to then pay to have it destroyed. And then you fell into that trap with the Soprano bill with the 10 places that only 10 places that could destroy it for you. So I guess this will take care of some of that. So now they can process things that don't pass inspection or fail testing for whatever reason, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding. I didn't look at deeply at that, but it allows for products that the grower who has something that's say moldy allows them to still transfer it
Okay.
for processing.
All right, and the next one is directly related to what I just mentioned. It's the one about the waste disposal license itself, the Soprano license.
Yeah,
They've corrected that.
yeah. We have a question from Eric Austin. Well, let me answer that in a second. So,
Sure.
yeah, so the Soprano bill last year basically limited the number of licenses for waste management to 10, and now there'll be no limit to those licenses. So it'll be a more fair and open market competition. Eric Austin says, Durbin said 3228 was needed to keep access to med patient records out of law enforcement's hands. Was the concept of denying access maintained in what passed? So Eric, that goes back to this OLETS issue from section 6C. In the version of 3228 that left the House, the language was stricken from 1030 that would have allowed the release of patient information to law enforcement if understood in that manner. There's a debate as to how to interpret that law. The Senate amended the House version so that the original language from 1030 is retained. So we couldn't get rid of that language from 1030 that was worrisome. The language is still law from 1030 that there shall be the transfer of information from the OMMA to law enforcement. However, the presumption is, and this is a worry that we have, we can't say we're done with this, but the presumption is that because that language exists in a section that's specifically related to business, the only information relevant there that might be transferred has to do with business licenses and not patient licenses. But that's going to depend upon how it's interpreted by the OMMA. So this is something we're going to keep our eyes on.
Okay, go ahead and unshare the screen, please. I think we're done with that.
Sure.
All right, I want to talk about the whole thing a little bit big picture here. This was a rough year. This legislative session was a rough year with what happened with the virus and everything getting shut down. It's kind of amazing we got this much done. I know there was a lot of bills. One I was directly involved in, the Creighton bill, which didn't even get done. It had already passed the House, but the Senate just in this time of emergency wasn't going to hear it. So we're lucky that this ended up getting through. And thank you to everybody who had anything to do with it. It's necessary. But this whole process and the end result here, in my opinion, reinforces what we've been saying for some time now. It's time to move forward. It's time to bring full access. This does very little to expand access. While we may be hammering out a few details here and there, the cannabis movement has been frozen nationally by this virus. And we need to kickstart it. And while this gets the state by for a few more months, I think this should also rally everybody to understand that a few things. One being that we need some protections in the Constitution, and we need to figure out some way to make that happen before something else we care about ends up on the chopping block. There was a lot of horse trading. I know that this entire bill, for a little while, the Senate was even refusing to hear. And that was an hour before they voted for it. So it was really some serious horse trading. So again, I think it's time we push forward. Lawrence, you've looked at some numbers. Let's go over briefly what you said in your Tulsa World article most recently about the numbers, about what rec would do, and in addressing what the governor said originally about, he said there's no more new money because our program is already basically recreational, and we can argue that all day, but we're not here to do that right now. We're arguing about the money. So tell me, Lawrence, what you put in your article.
Yeah, in the last two and a half weeks, I've had articles in both the Oklahoma and the Tulsa World discussing what Governor Stitt said and and basically the financial side of a medical versus a recreational program. So on April 22nd, the governor said that he doesn't see any point in opening up the program any farther because we already have a recreational program, and as such, there's no more money to be gained. So, like you said, Chris, we could debate whether or not this program is recreational, but as a matter of law, right, what we have is a program that requires a physician recommendation and a patient license. And at least presently, those licenses are only available to Oklahoma residents, and eventually they'll be available to others in a more limited fashion. Well, what we see right now is about $40 million in tax revenue coming out from our medical program. California, by contrast, has $650 million in revenue coming out of their in tax revenue coming out of their medical program, coming out of their recreational, their marijuana program, all told. Colorado has about $300 million coming out of their marijuana program, all told. And Pennsylvania, and this is sort of a relevant comparison, this is what I focus on in my Tulsa World article. Pennsylvania began the sale of medical marijuana when we did, 2 years ago. Pennsylvania began the sale of medical marijuana in 2018. Pennsylvania has, before their legislature this year, and it's supported by their governor, a move to recreational marijuana. And their analysis is approximately $500 million in tax revenue from that program. All right. So we're seeing right now here in Oklahoma, $40 million roughly in tax revenue. Pennsylvania is predicting $500 million. Now, when you look at the population differential, what I did was I compared the population of Pennsylvania to Oklahoma, as well as the population of people in surrounding states within a 90-minute drive of Oklahoma versus Pennsylvania. And roughly we have about half of the total population within those parameters of what Pennsylvania does. They have something roughly in the order of about 40 million. We have something roughly in the order of 20 million. The majority of those come from North Texas. We have the fourth largest metropolitan area in the entire country at our doorstep, the Dallas area. And so tax revenues, there's 11 states that have recreational programs, and also the District of Columbia. The law enforcement agencies, the DEA and so on, right? These agencies are existing in a location where recreational marijuana is legal. The Drug Enforcement Agency, right, is interdicting and arresting and destroying people's lives. And they've been doing so for decades. And they exist within a jurisdiction where marijuana is recreationally legal. This is insane. This is absurd.
Well, I think if we can, I think we would have to acknowledge if we can make this happen in Oklahoma fast in the next 1 to 2 years, we can help push the federal government to change because of these numbers you're talking about, because the people in North Texas will flood across that border, and people from Kansas and other surrounding states will come across the border, and they will see that the sky does not fall, just like when we went to Colorado. But as you pointed out, it's easier to get here. And, you know, I mean, we don't have the weather Colorado has. And, you know, we're not surrounded by states that already have recreational programs. So we stand a chance, in my opinion, of setting ourselves up as a state, as the next Colorado of this part of the country.
People travel from Connecticut and Rhode Island and New York into Massachusetts to buy the recreational marijuana in Massachusetts. People travel from Utah and from Idaho into Colorado to buy the recreational marijuana in Colorado. You know, we have Illinois, we have Michigan, we have all these states that are coming on board, and they're reaping huge financial benefits from it.
But here's the kicker, in my opinion. Okay, and this is why I keep screaming this every day to anybody I can get to listen, thinking if we can at least convince one person a day, we will get there. But the thing is, it's time sensitive. How much Oklahoma will benefit is time sensitive. If we roll it out before anybody else, we become a vacation spot. If we roll it out the same time or after everybody else, then we're just another state pulling more money from our own people. We don't become the vacation spot because we're not the new hip thing. If we establish ourselves as that, we'll be able to maintain that as Colorado has. So there is a serious need for this being time sensitive. Again, why I'm pushing this, or we're pushing this every single day to somebody.
And let me add this. People who say, well, I'm not comfortable with the idea of people breaking federal law, going across the state lines. We're breaking federal law every day here, right? Every single person in this state who is involved in the cannabis industry, every single person in this state who is in possession of cannabis is in violation of federal law.
Yeah, every card holder is in violation of federal law.
We are all, and it's basically just a matter of the decisions that have been made at the federal level to not, right, to not act on those violations. You know, the Cole memo and all those things that we're familiar with, right? That the Rohrabacher Farr Amendment, et cetera, that there have been decisions at the federal level that doesn't legalize any of this. It simply says to the DEA, no, we're not going to allow you to spend any money policing it.
Right.
We are all violating federal law. And if we want a revolution, if we want to liberate the people from an oppression, from an unjust system, then this is what we do. This is what people do when they have to fight for liberty.
Yeah, I worry too many have become complacent in Oklahoma since we've gotten the program we have. And for those watching, I want you to know that's what we're trying to do here is wake you guys up. We're trying to emphasize to everybody what Lawrence is saying here. We need to fight. The cannabis movement should not have stopped in Oklahoma. I understand it's been slowed down.
The end goal of 788 is not so you can get your weed. That's not where it ends. This is a goal to change society, to give us the freedom that we've been denied for generations.
That's it. Okay. Well, we are coming up on about 50 minutes, which is about long enough. We've been over what happened in 3228. We've talked about what we think needs to happen in the future. I can tell everybody that we're going to continue to reach out to the lawmakers. I know they called Sine Die the other day. I believe they're also going to be coming back for a special session to deal with some COVID health issues. And so we're going to continue to reach out to them and see if we can continue this conversation so that by the time we get to next session, any of this that can be done through the legislator is being done through the legislator so that we know what can't be done through the legislator. So we know as activists what we have to step up and take and demand by way of petition or whatever other way makes this happen. So that's the goal. Continue these conversations, make this happen one way or the other as fast as possible. Lawrence, do you have anything you want to say to wrap this up?
This is the mission, right? The mission is to end federal prohibition. And we here in Oklahoma are uniquely placed. We're in this special location where we're historically important. And we all need to not stop. We all need to continue on the fight, just like, we fought to get 788 passed. One way or another, people aren't free until all are free.
Yeah, I will say this. So many people, so many card holders, patients got such a charge out of we the people passed 788. Well, think about this, folks. What if we the people in Oklahoma passed recreational, forcing the federal government to change and end prohibition? 788 was huge. Ending federal prohibition, so much bigger. And we can be just as important in that fight as in the fight to help take care of our own people here in the state.
hundreds of millions of Americans still don't have legal access. And that includes tens of thousands of Oklahomans who are denied access by their pain doctors, by their oncologists.
Yeah.
There's so many burdens still that exist to people to have cannabis access in this state and beyond. The fight is not over.
And for those that don't know it, what's behind me here is the Cannabis Constitution of the state of Oklahoma, something Lawrence put together, and I helped him with a little bit a couple of years ago. Go check it out. You know, I'm finding that when I go and look back at some of the stuff we did at the beginning, like with the video I watched this morning that popped up on my timeline, it's still relevant. It's still relevant. We're still fighting for the same things. Our message really hasn't changed. So pull it up, take a look at it, guys. Tell us what you think. Maybe we'll work on some amendments. Everything has its time. All right, so that's about it for now. I say we do this in about another week and give everybody an update on any meetings we might have coming up. Because again, we're not going to let this lie. Something is going to happen this summer. I don't know what, but we are going to push it until something happens this summer. And next year when the legislators come back, we'll already know what we're going to get through legislation and what we're going to have to take back as the people. All right, that's it. Till next time, folks, stay grumpy. We'll see you on the road.